I watched Breaking Bad for the first time when I was in high school, and like every other teenage boy who watched it, I thought Walter White was so cool. But rewatching it at a more mature age, I understand better how terrible of a person Walter really is. In today's video, we're going to be looking at some of Walter's worst actions and the effect it has on those around him, particularly his family and Jesse. He initially makes it seem like he's just trying to support his family, but as we know, what causes him to continue to commit these actions is his massive ego. There will be spoilers ahead, so beware. Also, go ahead and like and subscribe if you haven't yet. That would really make my day. I'd also like to add that some of the actions and events I want to talk about in this video may not be in perfect chronological order, but it will at least be by seasons, so there'll be a little bit of organization. But without any further ado, let's jump right in. In season 1, Walter White started off as a simple high school chemistry teacher. Some people argue that the evil was always inside of him, but I disagree. I think Walt was a good man initially that turned himself into a bad man because he let pride and ego get the best of him. Originally, he wanted to make money for his family due to being diagnosed with cancer, but he let his ambition take over. In season 1, he does do evil things, but at this point, it's questionable. Still bad, and it has an effect on his family and Jesse and many other people, but there still seems to be some sort of moral justification that he really is doing it for his family. But in season 1, whenever Walt's diagnosed with lung cancer, he's offered money and help from Elliot and Gretchen, but due to his pride, he declines, and he lies to Skyler about accepting their help, which already shows slight signs of emotional abuse that he's going to put everyone around him through. And I think this is because he felt looked down upon and not respected by his family, which honestly may be the whole reason for the events of the show. But that is not me blaming his actions on his family, as the only person who can control his actions is Walt himself. And he chose to cook meth instead of accepting Elliot and Gretchen's help, which he got into by blackmailing Jesse into cooking with him after seeing him escape the scene during a ride-along busting a meth lab with Hank and Gomez. This shows the early signs of his instinct to manipulate Jesse, and it also shows how easy it is for Walter to manipulate Jesse. I think that's because Jesse has a respect for Walter, especially with him being his former chemistry teacher in high school. I think that made Jesse a lot more comfortable with Walter and viewing him as someone who always knows the answer to everything. And that works for Walter too, because Walter also thinks he knows the answer to everything. Walter and Jesse cooking together also causes them to need to steal a substance called methylamine due to a lack of Suedo, and the methylamine causes their meth to be the iconic blue color we all know today. Before this, Walt steals gear from the school, including a respirator with the school's name on it, and later, towards the end of the season, it's found at a past cook site, and Hank investigates it and finds that there are in fact things missing from the school. During this, the police find marijuana in the school janitor's car, causing them to suspect that he was the one that stole the materials, and he is fired from the school, and Walter is preserved. Walter didn't technically get Hugo fired, but in a way he did, because it was his decisions that caused Hugo to get fired, along with Hugo having marijuana in his possession. Also during this season, Walter, while confronting Tuco, decides to disguise a makeshift bomb in his product he's presenting, and he blows up Tuco's office, which is actually insane, because I feel like that's just such an endangerment of others. Not even just those in Tuco's office, but even the possibility of harming just regular innocent civilians. This was an early sign of Walter starting to show that he doesn't really value every life, which this was first shown when he locked Emilio and Crazy 8 in the RV, which killed Emilio and left Crazy 8 injured, and led Walter and Jesse to lock him in Jesse's basement, basically dehumanizing him and treating him like a dog. I understand Crazy 8 was a dangerous person, but still, if they were going to kill him, they should have just done it right off the bat and spared the whole captivity part. But as we know, eventually Walter has to kill him whenever he passes out and drops a plate and Crazy 8 picks up a shattered piece. And I'd just like to say, the scene where Walter is putting together the pieces of the broken plate and notices a piece missing and realizes that he's gonna have to kill Crazy 8 is one of my favorite scenes and is honestly what got me hooked. But anyways, already in only season 1, we could see the endangerment he's putting on those around him. And not just random people, we can see early on he's not scared to take lives. We see he's willing to lie and manipulate the people that are there for him and love him. I feel like we can also see in season 1 that Walter can act irrationally. For example, whenever he yelled at his boss at the car wash and walked out, blew up some random businessman's car at a gas station just because, attacking the teenagers in the store that were bullying Walt Jr., but actually, now that I think about it, that one's not that bad, but you get the point. And one last thing I'd like to mention about season 1 was something Skyler said to Walt in episode 5.
Make the right choice, Walt. You're not the only one it affects.
And I feel like that shows that the entire season is when he began making choices that would affect his family for the entire show. I kind of mark season 2 as the downfall of any morale that Walter may or may not have had left. In this season, after Walter and Jesse escape Tuco and Hank kills him, Walter continues to try to grow his drug empire and digging his hole deeper with the lying to his family. And even Jesse, who should be someone or one of the only people he can be fully truthful to. But this season, Walter begins betraying and using Jesse, and that's something that just becomes a bigger problem as the show goes on. Because as we know, in this season, one of the big ones happens for Walt's effect on not only those around him, but on the world. Let me explain. Jesse becomes romantically involved with Jane Margolis, who he met from renting an apartment from. Jane is a recovering addict, but Jesse and Jane both get back into using and using together, and this causes them to begin using heroin. Walt viewed Jane as something holding Jesse back from cooking, and one night Walt breaks into their apartment and sees that Jane is overdosing. This is a defining moment. He could help Jane, he could turn her over so she doesn't choke, or he could call for help, but he doesn't because he wants Jesse alone. He wanted Jane dead because he viewed her as a distraction and something holding back from cooking, so he let her die. And that one decision caused one of the craziest butterfly effects that does perfectly with the Walter White effect. Jane dying sends her father, Donald Margolis, an air traffic controller, into a depressive state, and while he's depressed and distracted on the job, he sends wrong directions to a plane, and two planes collide into each other over Albuquerque. Because of the death of his daughter, that could have been prevented by Walt. Therefore, in a butterfly effect kind of way, the Wayfarer 515 disaster was Walt's fault. And pause real quick, I'm adding this part in later because I forgot. Apparently, Walter and Jane's father also talked in a bar before her death. I forgot about that, but wanted to add it in. Resume. Also during this season, with Walt and Skylar's marriage continuing to struggle, Walter, in one of the most uncomfortable scenes of all time, attempts to start intercourse with Skylar in the kitchen. She tells him to stop several times and gives indicators that it's not the time or place, and he continues until she screams at him. This scene just really rubbed me the wrong way, and kind of shows Walt feeling like he has the same amount of power at home as he does in the drug industry. Also, this isn't really anything that relates to the point I'm trying to make with this video, but something that was just bad that shows Walt's pride was the scene where he keeps giving Walt Jr. tequila and yells at Hank,
"My son, my bottle, my house!"
I feel like this really shows the lack of respect that Walter feels that causes him to have the urge to fuel his ego. And side note, this is also the season Mike, Saul, and Gus Fring are all introduced. Walter used the Heisenberg alias since his meeting with Tuco in season 1, but in my opinion he didn't really begin transitioning into actually being Heisenberg until season 3. In this season, Walter, or Heisenberg, is being targeted by the Salamanca twins to avenge the death of Tuco. Walter also comes clean to Skylar about what he's really been doing, and Walter begins living in an apartment, and Skylar urges Walter to keep his distance from his own family because she's afraid of him, and he's the only one to blame for that fear, because honestly, Skylar has every right to be afraid of him. Most wouldn't guess that the man you've been married to and had a family with would end up being a drug lord as soon as he turns 50. Skylar, feeling like she can't get Walter out of her life, starts sleeping with her boss Ted Beneke to get back at him. There are also power struggles this season between Walter and Gus, and both basically keep power checking each other, most of the time Gus coming out on top. And Walt uses Jesse as a tool in their battle for power. I mean, Gus does too, but we're not talking about Gus, we're talking about Walt. But eventually Walt begins cooking for Gus underneath the laundromat with Gail Bedecker. He eventually convinces Gus to fire Gail and hire Jesse instead. Jesse finds out the two men who killed Combo were two of Gus's men. Well, they used a kid, but you get the point. Jesse wants to kill these two men to avenge Combo, but Walter points out how bad of an idea that would be, seeing that they work for him. And after negotiations were made between Gus and Jesse, a confrontation still happens. I can't remember exactly how all that happened with Gus's men and Jesse, but I do know the end result, and that was Walter running them over and shooting the other. Gus begins hunting down Jesse and rehires Gail. That's when the famous scene of Mike and Victor taking Walt captive planning to execute him, and Walter gives Jesse the order to kill Gail, so that no one else will be able to cook as pure as Walt and Jesse, and leaving Gus with no other option.
Your boss is gonna need me.
And then, even though he didn't want to, Jesse kills Gail. So in this season, we can see that Walter was doing anything to maintain his power and leverage over those around him. And like other seasons, he simply has a disregard for human life. This season, he continues the non-stop lying. He lies to his family, he lies to Jesse, he literally lies to everyone, which is crazy because he's not even that good of a liar in the first few seasons. It's just that the people around him don't expect it, so it makes it easier for him. But the biggest effect I would say Walter has on anyone this season is Jesse. He manipulates, or better yet, convinced Jesse to kill a man, knowing he didn't want to, and that really goes on to affect Jesse, and it really changed his demeanor. A lot happened in season 4, so to briefly summarize, Walter and Jesse have to deal with their consequences of killing Gale. Skylar is trying to buy Bogdan's car wash for money laundering for Walt's illegal money, and this is the season that she becomes more involved with Walt's activities. Hank is recovering from his injuries from the Salamanca twins, collecting minerals.
The rocks, Hank.
No, they're minerals. Jesus, Maria.
After this, he starts looking for leads to investigate on Heisenberg, Gus, and Gail Bedeker's murder. Walter starts wanting too much out of the industry and scaring Skylar even more. Jesse gets more involved in Gus's operations and works with Mike a lot, and Walter gets jealous. And at the climax, Walter is able to turn Jesse away from Gus, and they make a plan to kill Gus using Hector Salamanca. They make it look like Hector ratted to the DEA, but in reality, they were just baiting him to blow up a nursing home for whenever Gus came to kill Hector for ratting to the DEA. So Walter did a lot of bad stuff this season that affected others, and it was like it came naturally to him. Let's start off small. When Jesse isn't available to help him, he hires 3 women from the laundromat to clean the meth lab for him, and due to this, Gus deports them back to Honduras, all because Walt hired them to clean his meth lab. Walt this season was struggling with his power dynamic / rivalry with Gus, and was clearly possessive and jealous even of the possibility of Jesse growing in Gus's empire. This causes him to do 2 things that are really messed up, which I'll explain in 1 second. Walt also crashes his car with Hank in it on purpose, whenever Hank was suspecting the laundromat for having a meth super lab underneath it. This injured Hank, and it could have been a lot worse. It showed that Walter was willing to do anything to protect his secret, even if that meant putting someone like Hank's life in danger. So now, for the 2 really messed up things that Walter did that I was talking about. For one, to turn Jesse against Gus, he poisons Brock with a plant called Lily of the Valley, and makes Jesse think it was the ricin from his cigarettes, because his cigarette with the ricin went missing because Huel took it. But what Walter really used to poison Brock was the Lily of the Valley, and it's obvious how this affected others. It affected Jesse because it put him at risk of looking like a suspect when he spoke up about the possibility of it being the ricin. It affected Brock himself since it hospitalized him, and it affected his mother Andrea by putting a mental strain on her. And just in general, that is so messed up. You can't just poison kids. Then once Walter successfully turns Jesse on Gus, he uses Hector Salamanca, which is pretty much Gus's mortal enemy, to lure Gus to the nursing home, and once he has him there, the bomb that Walter planted on Hector's wheelchair kills Gus, Tyrus, and Hector himself. This was another really insane scenario to me. The fact that Walter just planted a bomb in a nursing home. Obviously, a lot of the things he does in the show aren't morally or ethically acceptable or anything like that, but I feel like those 2 back to back is just kind of mind-blowingly evil. Walter blowing up the nursing home and killing Gus obviously affects the community in general, but it also affects Skylar, because this is the part of the show where she's the most afraid of Walter. But the worst thing of all that Walt did in season 4 was not go goat karting with Jesse. By season 5, Walter is fully embracing his identity as a drug lord. He tries to jump into power immediately after killing Gus so that no one else is able to. Hank and the DEA are trying to find out where the blue crystal is coming from. Walt, Mike, Jesse, and Todd rob a train, and this is when Walter starts being fully honest with Skylar.
Get off! Get off!
Oh yeah, and Todd kills a child during this. What does this show have against kids? Skylar's fear for her family and herself because of Walter is at an all-time high because of Walt's whole "I am the danger" speech. And because of his ego and not being able to handle criticism from others, Walt shoots Mike and kills him. Hank discovers Walt is Heisenberg while on the toilet. Then later on, Jesse and Walt fall out and Jesse goes to Hank and the DEA. Walt makes a fake confession tape accusing Hank of being at fault for all of his actions, and then by the end of the season, season, the neo-Nazis that Walt teamed up with kill Hank and capture Jesse. Well, actually, Walt pretty much gave Jesse up. And then they take him as a cooking slave, and then eventually Walt comes back for revenge and kills all the neo-Nazis, frees Jesse, and then dies to a gunshot wound while Baby Blue plays. And probably one of the most beautiful finales to any series. The things that I listed in this season probably had the greatest effect on those around him out of any other season. There's the things I listed, but he also hired men to kill 10 other men in different prisons in the span of 2 minutes. And he poisoned Lydia. So how did these things affect those around Walt? First of all, we should talk about how Walt worked with the neo-Nazis. I feel like that's just shady and gross. If you're comfortable enough to work with people like that and don't see a problem with it, I don't know, it's just red flag. He used them to kill the 10 men in different prisons to tie up loose ends after killing Mike. And by working with them, he gets Hank killed.
He made up his mind 10 minutes ago.
This affects his family deeply. Maria lost her husband, Skyler lost her brother, Walt Jr. lost his cool uncle, and they aren't wrong for blaming Walter. It was his fault. Not only for involving with Jack and the neo-Nazis, but also for choosing to put his family in the position he has since season 1. We know that he's always been around dangerous people for the entire show, so he had to have known that he wasn't just putting himself at risk. He was also putting his entire family at risk, but overall, Walter also affected Skyler and the rest of his family by how drastically he changed. Like I said earlier, the dude turned 50, got diagnosed with lung cancer, and decided best course of action was to cook meth. Walter throughout the entire series was basically psychologically torturing and manipulating Jesse the whole time he knew him. And then he turned him over to Jack and Todd for him to get physically tortured and kept as a slave. Jesse was one of the ones that Walter had the greatest effect on. He pretty much ruined Jesse's life and completely changed who Jesse is. Overall, this season was the one where we could really see the effects of everything Walter did pile up on those around him, and how he ruined everything for a lot of people, including himself. Throughout all 5 seasons, he was progressively hurting everyone around him for himself. By the end, everyone he loved hated him, or was simply afraid of him, so much so that Skyler said she was waiting for the cancer to come back. And it may just be his ego, but it seems to be like he feeds off of it. Well, anyways, I'm trailing off. That's all I've got for today. Let me know if you guys would be interested in more Breaking Bad videos, because this one was a lot of fun to make. But if not, let me know what you do want to see next, and I'll make it happen. If you made it this far, make sure to like and subscribe. It would really make my day. I love y'all. Peace.